Shalom and welcome to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, Messianic Rabbi Eric Walker. The political landscape of America is changing, and socialism is rearing its head in a more profound way than in any other previous time in our history. Conservatism is being redefined, and the Bible, if even referenced, is no longer the foundation upon which America is built. Here to talk about what is going on in America today is Joe Newby of conservativefiringline.com. Joe's a 10-year veteran in the United States Marine Corps who wrote for Examiner.com for 6 years. His articles have appeared at Newsbusters, Spokane Faith and Values, and other sites. He currently runs the conservativefiringline.com, where he discusses important issues to conservatives. He's the co-author of Banned, How Facebook Enables Militant Islamic Jihad. Here to bring us up to date on America Gone Wild is Joe Newby. Joe, good to see you, my friend.
Good to see you, Eric. How are you today?
I am well, just fascinated at the daily executive orders, the missing Kamala Harris, the tragedies at the border, the idea of trillions of dollars in spending, of tax hikes that go back to a time when Jimmy Carter was president, and interest rates skyrocketed to 18%, and inflation was crippling, and there were excise taxes on everything, imports, exports, gasoline. It was just crazy, and started a cascade of monetary decline. It was the time where the International Bank of Credit and Commerce, the Iran-Contra problem, the fall of the Shah. We're looking at a similar scenario to that, what I consider to be the worst president in American history.
Yeah, absolutely. I tend to agree with you, and keep in mind that before the election, remember Joe Biden himself said that only a dictator would rule through executive orders. Yet here he is ruling through executive orders. So, and Crackers the bird agrees. She's not very happy with the Biden regime at all, and I don't blame her.
You know, California's got this recall going. New York has this situation. Crime, violent crime in America is on the rise. Murder rates are just ridiculous, and we're doing nothing in the country to address what the country wants. The whole process of increasing unemployment benefits has been, I can't drive by a business that doesn't have a sign out with the help wanted.
Right. Well, actually, you know, as far as the murder rate and the crime rate in America, yes, in fact, the regime is doing something. Democrats are doing something, but they're not doing anything that's going to help. What they're actually doing is they're actually taking steps, and they're deliberately doing so to make the situation even worse by cutting back on police funding. Look at what's happened to police forces across the country. Officers are demoralized. They're leaving the force. They're leaving the job. They're saying, you know, why should we put our lives on the line for a city and for leadership that doesn't like us, that won't back us up, that won't support us, that doesn't have our back? And you can't blame them. My oldest brother was he's a retired Harris County deputy sheriff down in Houston, Texas, and I couldn't, you know, I'm so glad that he is now retired and off the street. I could not imagine him or my stepfather, who was a game warden in Texas. I could not imagine either one of them being working under the kind of environment that we have today. This is outrageous. This is ludicrous.
You know, we have so much crime, and with this defunding of police, it is the agenda to federalize law enforcement. And you've heard me gripe about federalizing the Department of Education under the Reagan administration as being one of the errors of that time.
Right.
And now we're stuck with this, teaching my granddaughter that she has the choice of what she wants to be. She can be male or female or binary or something else.
Yeah.
This idea of critical race theory that basically says that there's systemic racism in the nation, and that if I am not actively involved in anti-racial activities, then by the standards they've established, I am therefore a racist.
Well, it's even worse than that. It's even worse than that, Eric. It's actually child abuse. What they are doing with this critical race theory. Not only are they indoctrinating our kids with a provable, blatant lie, they are engaging in the very discrimination that they claim they want to fight. It's outrageous.
I don't think people have really looked at it. And if you look at when it was first introduced, which was like in the 50s, it was to take a look at the court system and the bias in the legal system. And it was supposed to be a legal analysis saying, is there a disproportionate amount of sentencing, harder sentencing for people of color than there was for Caucasians? Is there a way to analyze this and make sure that there's the uniform administration of appropriate sentencing? But yet it took on a life of its own, as all these doctrines do, and now it's become part of the educational process, it's become part of the narrative, and quite honestly, I don't know of anybody in the African American community that is not willing to have an open dialogue about the problems. And part of the biggest problem in the community is literacy, and that feeds more into the system than any other single determining factor. So if your parents are not literate, there's a 70% greater chance of you going into the system. If you, as a child, reading below the literacy rate, there's a 90% chance that you are going to be in the system. The system either being of juvenile detention or incarcerated for crimes, or be led into a life of gangs, drugs, crime-related activities. So if we know that from a sociological perspective, that the greatest contributor to the 2 or 3 million people we put in prison is to teach them to read. Why do we, you remember, who was it? I don't even remember what administration. Reading was fundamental.
Yeah, I remember that.
And it's not a matter of color, it's a matter of reading.
Exactly. This is just, the left, Eric, has used race for decades. This is just another excuse for the left to use race, and what you find is that they continually push the envelope. All right, like you said, something that started out to be fairly benign uh, has now morphed into something that resembles something that would have been written by Adolf Hitler in Mein Kampf. We are reaching a point in our society, I'm afraid, where we may very well end up seeing violence and bloodshed within our streets, similar to what happened in the 1860s with the Civil War. We are being pushed in that direction, and I think it is being deliberately done so in order to establish a left wing dictatorship that strips us of our constitutional rights. Listen to what Joe Biden himself has said, not once, but multiple times, that no amendment to the Constitution is absolute. And so far, to my knowledge, I'm the only one. I think there may have been one or two others. I don't know. But to my knowledge, I'm the only one who has asked the question, okay, I know he was talking about the Second Amendment, but does he include the First Amendment, the Fourth Amendment, the Fifth Amendment? What about the 13th Amendment? What about the 19th or the 25th? What about all of these other amendments? The ones that ended slavery, okay? The ones that gave black people the right to vote, the ones that gave women the right to vote. What about those amendments? Are those not absolute as well? Let's face it, under Joe Biden, Eric, the Constitution is at risk. The very document that he swore to preserve, protect, and defend from all enemies, foreign and domestic, he is actively attacking. He is actively at war with that document. This is frightening, Eric. I thought things were bad under Barack Obama. This is even worse than anything Obama has ever done, and it's frightening.
How much regret do you think the American public is living with in regards to Joe Biden being president and the regret that Republicans? I said this the other night or the other morning that the there's a part of the Republican Party that approached the election as if it were a diving competition and were voting based on style points and degree of difficulty. And Donald Trump didn't win any style points, and therefore they just didn't get out and vote for him because they didn't like his style.
Right, right.
Now here we are 100 days into the Biden administration, and 4 years worth of good work is being undone. And certainly Trump wasn't a perfect president, but the policies, I think, had he run on policy and not on this ludicrous driving home this rigged election theology of his that he just would not ever get out there and say something about what he was going to do in the next 4 years, turned a lot of people off. But now I think people are living with a lot of regret, although while the money is flowing from the federal government and people are getting not richer, but they're getting subsidized, they're getting a flavor and a taste of socialism that they seem to like, and they have an appetite for it. They're looking for their fourth check, their fifth check. They're saying that they can make more by getting a monthly stipend from the government and increased unemployment benefits, that they're still saying it's COVID related, but the fact is that COVID is old business.
It is. It is. People may be enjoying that to a certain degree, but I think there's a lot more regret out there, Eric, than what we may realize. And I think the regret is going to get even worse, especially when people realize that as the federal government can give, so too can the federal government take away, just like it is doing now. It's taking away our civil liberties. It's dictating to us essentially what we must think. If we don't think in a particular way, We are flagged as domestic extremists. I just read an article this morning where the DHS is looking at ways to uh, look at what quote unquote domestic extremists are saying online. You know, and I know the modern definition of a domestic extremist is anyone whose views are, fall to the right of Joseph Stalin or Adolf Hitler. This is where we are in this country. If you're a Republican, if you support Trump, if you don't go along with this critical race theory nonsense and whatever CNN and MSNBC come up with, you're a domestic extremist. That they've said so. Um, they have already come out and said, you had Andrea, what was it? Not Andrea Mitchell. Um, Nicole Wallace, I'm sorry, Nicole Wallace, come out and talk about droning quote unquote extremists, meaning Trump supporters. You've had this ABC News editor come out and talking about cleansing the country of Trump supporters. They want blood, Eric. They actually, honest to God, want blood. They want a civil war. There, that's the only explanation for this kind of rhetoric, and you hear it every single day on these so-called news programs. You hear it every single day at MSNBC and CNN. They want bloody civil war. There's no other way to put it. There's no other way to break it down. That's what they want. So I am very concerned, Eric. Yes, I think there's going to be a lot of regret, but I think by the time most people begin to realize what the regret is, it's going to be too late because they're already going to have the heavy boot of government on their neck.
Midterm elections will certainly have a impact. The majority, Democratic majority in the House is now just a handful. The majority slipping away, and with this runoff in where is it, where the husband died and she
Texas,
in
yeah.
Texas, and in that district,
Right.
that will be a the delta on that is going from +1 to a -1, and all of a sudden you start to look at if there were any other deaths or resignations. It seems that people are at least now looking at what would happen if we regain the majority of the House.
Right. Right.
Which means Nancy Pelosi is no longer the Speaker. Kevin McCarthy is, and
Right.
that changes things.
Hmm. I tend to agree. Here's the thing. All things being equal, under normal circumstances, I would say the Republican Party is in a very strong position to take the House and the Senate in 2022. Historically speaking, that has generally been the way it's happened. Uh, Depending on who which party controls the White House, usually it's the opposite party that comes back in the first midterm to take over the House and the Senate. Um, that's been the way it's generally been. Okay, but with this HR 1, if this HR 1 goes through and Biden does sign it and it a holds up to scrutiny by the Supreme Court, uh, there's no telling what can happen in 2022. I'm come to the conclusion. I'm just about ready to see some Democrat put in a bill making it illegal to vote for a Republican. I mean, that's how extreme they have gotten. So I ordinarily I would say yes, the Republican Party is in a very strong position to take back control in 2022. I hope they do for the good of the country. I hope they do, because if they don't, I don't believe the country will survive 4 years of this Democrat administration. I really don't.
The can excuse me, the cancel culture, the overly exuberant, if you will, responses to crime, the idiocy of investing money in Amtrak and not in finishing the border wall,
Right.
is ludicrous.
It is. It is. And I would go one step further. I'm not I'm somewhat hesitant to say that that Biden's order to stop the construction is legal. I don't believe it is. And I've heard arguments that say that no, Biden cannot do what he's done. But I also know that in this day and age, it doesn't really matter. Legalities don't mean a thing. The Constitution doesn't mean a thing. All that matters is what the left wants. And so I'm a bit concerned about that when I see this crisis on the border, when I see what's going on down there, when I see what this administration is doing to America day by day by day. It's frightening, Eric. It really is.
There's no long game in this, except to undo everything that was done to advance, and I'm thinking that it's to advance Kamala Harris to be president.
It certainly looks that way. I tend to agree. It certainly I mean, look at what happened with with this fiasco with Biden's mask the other day. My gosh, that was scary. I mean, uh, we had a very clear glimpse of the level of dementia that's taking place within Joe Biden. It really is frightening. And yes, you're right. I think there's an effort there to prepare the country for her to take over as president, and that's scary.
And that would automatically put Nancy Pelosi as vice president.
Well, I don't know about that. I don't think so. I mean, it would. The only way that I could see Pelosi advancing to the White House would be if something were to happen to both Biden and Kamala Harris. But no, I don't think. In fact, I'm pretty certain that's the case. That just because Kamala Harris would take over doesn't necessarily mean that Pelosi would become vice president. And I think the precedent for that statement would be taking a look at what happened when Gerald Ford took over after President Nixon resigned. I believe, he, the person he selected, Spiro Agnew, was actually selected to be vice president by Gerald Ford.
Well, it wouldn't surprise me if Kamala Harris didn't pick a lunatic like AOC or
No, nothing would surprise me at this point, Eric.
You know, the fact that John Kerry is still around, the fact that we're talking with Iran, the fact that we are looking at China potentially invading Taiwan, and the response to that, and it was stunning the way this was reported, that like 85% of all semiconductor chips are produced in Taiwan.
Right.
I don't understand why, even during the Trump administration, we didn't move semiconductor production back to the United States, chip production back to the United States. This is a perfect storm, perfect setup that if China invades Taiwan and has control over the microchip industry, that they virtually seized hold of all computing, all telephone, iPhone, all cell phone, all computer manufacturing comes under the Chinese.
Right.
And the relationship's not good. And it seems like people want there to be an armed conflict between us and China.
It certainly looks that way. I don't, but I mean, I don't want a conflict between us and China. But you're right. It certainly does look like it's heading in that way, and China has been making some noises at the administration, basically telling Biden to back down. You know, basically sit down, shut up, do what you're told. Um, it makes you wonder just how far in the bag Biden is for the Chinese communists. It really does. I know it makes me wonder.
The concern becomes that is he sympathetic to the ideology? And you know, listen, I was around in the 60s. Almost everybody had a copy of Mao's Red Book. That was something that we talked about, we studied, we looked at as a alternative. Was there something to this idea? We decided that there wasn't, and
Right.
that as bad as the American situation in Vietnam was, that this certainly was not the answer.
No.
It was you know, changing the leadership of the country and getting out of Vietnam.
Right.
But socialism hasn't worked anywhere, and we're so there already with these subsidies, with these stimulus payments, with this commitment for the I mean, they've already announced that starting in July that families are going to receive $300 per person in the household for 6 months. That's an $1,800 a month, and then get an $1,800 tax credit, which will be paid to them. So there's another $3,600 that they're factoring in per person. And then if you have a child, you get money for the child as well. For low-income earners, that puts them in a pretty good position between the unemployment. So you go to work enough time to gather, and that's what people are doing. They're going back to work, getting back on the unemployment roster, and then leaving again.
Right.
And it's supposed to be that unemployment's not eligible for you if you resign. It has to be for termination. But these people are quitting their jobs and then filing a false claim that they were terminated, and the employer doesn't want to have come under scrutiny, so they just don't refute it. I don't really know what's happening there, but it seems convoluted and pretty crazy for us to have as many employers that have job openings that can't find people because they're making more money to stay home.
Right. And this whole thing is basically an open doorway to the universal basic income that the left has been talking about for some time now. In fact, I think it was Oakland. Yeah, I believe it was Oakland that talked about that actually started some kind of a universal basic income, except they decided to keep whites from it. They denied this basic income to white people.
This was like the farm subsidies. The farm subsidies
Right.
were given to the Asians, Hispanics, and to Asians, Hispanic, and African American and white farmers were excluded from it.
Right.
That's federal discrimination at its highest point.
It's a violation of the law. It is a violation of the law, but they did it anyway. And I heard that there was a planned lawsuit for that. I hope so. I really do, because that's blatant discrimination, blatant racism. Um, and the thing is, the ironic thing is, it's coming from the same people who claim there's quote unquote systemic racism. And what are they doing? They're engaging in racism. It's outrageous. And it's all part of this critical race nonsense. It's all part of the left's overriding goal and plan to divide this country, to turn this country into something that more resembles the former Soviet Union. That's what it's all about.
Boggles my mind. We're talking with Joe Newby of ConservativeFiringLine.com, where you're going to find poignant, very critical thinkers who are contributing their opinions on politics, terrorism, education, crime, and the stories of the day from a conservative perspective, and really bringing to light some of the things that for some are maybe obvious and for others that aren't obvious, but they've got a strong following, a great lineup of contributors, and Joe has been with us over the past 4.5 years as a consistent contributor to this narrative. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll rejoin Joe Newby of ConservativeFiringLine.com. We'll be right back. Shalom. I'm Messianic Rabbi Eric Walker, host of Revealing the Truth, Revealing the Bible, and Revealing Prophecy, seen every week on the Igniting Nation Broadcasting Network. Our daily on-demand programming is available on our Apple and Android apps and on Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Fire, and Android TV. We broadcast live Monday through Friday through our apps, on our website, ignitingnation.com, and on Facebook Live. You can listen daily on our audio platforms on Spotify, iTunes, TuneIn, and iHeart. Our lineup of best-selling authors bring you the most in-depth biblical insights into the most pressing issues of our time, including prophecy, Israel, spiritual warfare, and a wide variety of contemporary Christian issues impacting the body of Messiah around the globe. If you missed the live show, you can always catch up on the Igniting Nation YouTube channel. Follow us on social media and join us as we endeavor to heal the nations with the Word of God.
With today's smartphone technology, news, information, sports, and entertainment is widely available and almost unbounded. But what about the information that believers in Yeshua are looking for? Well, now there's an app for that. Igniting a Nation now has apps available for Android and iPhone. With our app, you'll gain access to everything you would in our website, from our featured guests to our live streaming shows. Visit Google Play or the Apple Store and download Igniting a Nation's new app today.
Shalom. I'm Messianic Rabbi Eric Walker, inviting you to study right by my side through the Biblical Truth Library. Imagine having access to over 1,000 hours of audio and video teachings available to you through our website on a subscription basis or via our Apple and Android apps on an a la carte basis. Whichever method you choose, we promise to deliver new insights into the living Word of God as seen through the eyes of a Jewish believer. If you hunger and thirst like millions around the world for a deeper walk with God and the revelation of new understanding of the Scriptures, visit ignitingnation.com and click on the Biblical Truth Library or on any device with our free app. Don't let another day go by without receiving your heart's desire for a new depth of understanding into all of God's Word. Shalom. I'm Messianic Rabbi Eric Walker, inviting you to join me and my special featured guests twice per month with Rabbi Zeb Parat and Carl Gallups, and monthly with Dr. Michael Heiser, Dr. Michael Lake, Dr. Timothy Jennings, Dr. Mark Baker, Dr. Jeffrey Johnson, Drs. Michelle and Mark Sherwood, Dr. Kim Moss, Derek Gilbert, Peter Rosenberger, Brandon Gallups, Steve Fair, Stephen Black, for in-depth insights into Israel, prophecy, the unseen realm, The Brain, Spiritual Warfare, Overcoming Shame, Mysteries of the Bible, Prophetic Insights, The Sensational and the Supernatural, Caregiving, Addiction Recovery, Understanding the Divided Heart, Same-Sex Attraction, and much more. We're proud to feature some of the greatest biblical minds from both Israel and around the United States. Check out our featured guest lineup and 24/7 feed on ignitinganation.com or watch by topic on any device with our free apps. If you can't find what you need, you're just not looking in the right place. Follow us on social media and download our free apps today. Shalom. I'm Messianic Rabbi Eric Walker, inviting you to join me and Israel's #1 rated guide, Edo Canaan, for our annual Israel trip. Our 2022 trip is now open for registration for our 18th trip to Israel. Our trip will take us from Tel Aviv to the Galilee, down to the Dead Sea, and 4 nights in Jerusalem. You will walk where Yeshua walked and watch the Bible turn from black and white to living color. Visit ignitinganation.com/events and download the registration form today. No, it's not too early to take advantage of our payment plan designed to fit any budget. All of our trips sell out, and we want you to experience this life-changing journey. Registration is now open for April 2nd to 13th, 2022, and we promise you, you will never read your Bible the same way again. Shalom and welcome back to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, Messianic Rabbi Eric Walker, and we're talking with Joe Newby of Conservative.com, where we're talking about issues important to conservatives. Joe, welcome back.
Good to be here, Eric. Good to see you again.
Joe, in your estimation, what's the likelihood of Joe Biden finishing out 4 years?
Not good. I don't see him finishing out actually the first 2 years. But that's just my opinion. Look at what happened the other day when he couldn't find his mask. Now keep in mind, just put a little bit of context to this, because the CDC has said that it's no longer required for Americans to wear masks outside. It doesn't make any sense. Well, it never has, really, especially if you're vaccinated. So here you have Joe Biden, who is fully vaccinated, surrounded by people who are fully vaccinated. He is at an event where there's all kinds of social distancing. People are in cars. They're not scrunched up together, but yet he puts he puts his mask in his pocket, and then at the end of his speech, he can't find his mask, and people were coming up to try, to give him another mask, even though he doesn't need a mask to be outside, and then he realizes that it's in his pocket. After looking for it, what did he say? Oh, I'm in trouble. Yeah, he's definitely in trouble. I honestly don't believe that this man will make it through the first 2 years. I really don't. The man suffers from dementia. It's getting worse. Everybody, I mean, you've even got foreign countries. I don't know if you've kept up with what they've been saying on Skype or Sky News over in Australia. They've been hammering this man. They're saying he's not fit to be on the world stage. He's not. He suffers tremendously. It's like abuse for him to be put in this position. It really is. I mean, to me, it is literally elder abuse, what his wife and what the Democrat Party is doing to this man. He needs to resign. He needs to do so immediately. Granted, that means Kamala Harris would take over, but seriously, Eric, this man does not need to be where he is now. He is in no shape to lead this country at all. Period. He needs to go.
So who's pulling the strings? By name, What cabal is really pulling the strings over this entire agenda?
Well, I would say, if we look back in history, I bet you $1 to a donut hole, there's a fellow by the name of George Soros behind a lot of this. Look at what he's done in as far as putting in district attorneys into various states and communities. Look at what he's done there. Biden's agenda looks very much like the agenda that George Soros would want. So it wouldn't surprise me one bit to see that George Soros is a big driver behind a lot of this. Then there's Bill Gates, the man who wants to diminish the sun's rays to reverse quote unquote global warming. I wouldn't be a bit surprised if he is involved in some of this. Of course, the father of all of this, of course, Eric, I think you would agree with me, would be the father of all lies, and that would be the devil himself, quite honestly. But as far as human intervention, I would have to say probably George Soros and that crowd.
The influence is it's like every day I catch wind of something that's like, where did that come from? Mm-hmm. It's just like out of left field. Mm-hmm. And I don't see Congress meeting and voting on legislation. I don't see the Senate meeting and voting on legislation. Right. So these ideas are being birthed somewhere, and the bright idea of pouring money into Amtrak. This has been a failed enterprise since Amtrak came into being. Passenger traffic trains. It's not a mode of transportation that is high up there.
No, it's not. It really isn't. And Amtrak was never run that efficiently to begin with. So,
but
just like the post office,
right.
Look at how much money that's lost.
It's mind-boggling to look at the crisis at the border, which is a crisis.
Yes.
And knowing that those who are crossing over are not just from Guatemala, they're not just from Nicaragua, they're not just from Mexico. It's that blind eye, like it was with the students in 2001 who were discovered to only take courses on taking off a plane, but they never took a course on how to land a plane. And they wound up being the ones who flew into the Twin Towers.
Right.
They were never trained to land a plane.
Right.
Nobody ever questioned that. It would seem like somebody would look at that. So you see, things are happening, and I don't understand the lack. I mean, the only person that I hear talking is Graham, Lindsey Graham.
Right.
What they did to Tim Scott is unconscionable. What they called him, and there again is government is no longer representing anything to do with the people of this nation.
No, it's not. No, it's not. We no longer have a government a government that governs by the consent of the governed. Okay, let's put it that way. We no longer have that.
It's mind-boggling. I mean,
yes, it is.
As an average American, I have a healthy regard and respect for police officers. It still makes me nervous driving down the road if I see a police officer that I don't want to do something wrong.
Right.
You know, I don't want to call my 94-year-old mother, 95-year-old mother, and say I got in trouble. You know, you're raised that way.
Right.
That you
Right.
have a healthy regard and healthy respect for the law. Uh, there's a generation and generations merging together. I don't even know what to call it, who are just anti everything and will dominate the narrative to the point where, in the exercising of their freedom of speech, they are denying you your freedom of speech. And so the only vehicles are conservative talk radio, conservative talk shows, one or two conservative news networks, and the conservative voices
Right.
are virtually silent on the floor of the House and on the floor of the Senate. What are they afraid of?
That's a good question. I think they're all pretty afraid of this thing called cancel culture, because it takes nothing really to outrage the mob, and once the mob is outraged, pretty much anything goes at that point. That's why I say, it reminds me a lot of what history taught about Germany, right about the time of the rise of Hitler, when you had the SA and the SS browbeating people into going along with whatever the Nazi power said. And that's pretty much what you have happening today. Only we don't call it the SA or the SS, we call it cancel culture. We call it CNN, we call it MSNBC, but it's the same thing.
Why people are listening to voices like Joy Behar or Whoopi Goldberg or Don Lemon or any of these people is beyond my comprehension when their agenda, excuse me, where their agenda is so anti-conservative.
Right, not just anti-conservative, but anti-American. It's that's a good question, Eric, and it's one that I've asked myself many times, although in a much different way. I've come to the conclusion. I mean, to me, it's uh, how can I explain this? It's like, which came first, the chicken or the egg? You know what I mean? Except in my mind, it's like, which comes first, the liberal or the stupid? And to expand on that, it's like, okay, does one become a left winger? Does one become a leftist as a result of being uninformed, ignorant, and stupid? Or does being a leftist make one uninformed, ignorant, and stupid? It's like, which comes first? And I have yet to be able to answer that question, Eric.
You know,
but that's what it
watching what's
boils down to.
happening in these blue states where the governor is a Democrat, and the distinct difference, I mean, the radical difference in the approach
Hmm.
of what was done in Florida, what was done in Texas, which was incredibly successful
Right.
in dealing with COVID. They just said, look, it's just another thing. Uh, Keep the doors open. Life goes on. Shutting this country down for 13 months. International travel being stymied. Airlines are going to have a bailout or they're not going to survive.
Right.
We're looking at deficit spending that we're not even spending other people's money anymore. We're spending fictitious money.
It doesn't. Yeah. It hasn't even been printed yet. That's a good question, Eric. You take a look at the way Democrat states are run versus the way Republican states are run, and it's the difference is like between night and day. I lived in California years and years ago. My wife and I did, but at the time, I mean, California was always a little strange. Okay, But when I lived there, the governor was a fellow by the name of Pete Wilson, and he was a Republican. Uh, I don't know if you'd call him a staunch conservative. Maybe in some ways he was, other ways maybe not so much. Uh, but compared to what's there now, he was very conservative compared to what's there now. And when Pete Wilson was governor of California, um, yeah, it was hard, but you could actually live in California. Okay, but look at it now. I don't see how people can live there, to be honest with you. And you've got all these people that are fleeing states like California and coming up to states like Idaho. Probably the same thing in Alabama. People coming to Alabama and Texas and what have you, wanting to flee the tyranny of these left wing states, but yet they bring with them the very same ideas that they left. And you have to wonder what's wrong with some of these people. You know?
Well, I lived there from 83 to 90.
Hmm.
So Duke Magian was
Right.
was the governor then, and you know, you could afford to live in California. You know,
Hmm.
I could afford to live in Diamond Bar. Well, Joe, unfortunately, we've run out of time, and
Yes, we have.
this is our final visit together. So I want to thank you for 4.5 great years together, and consider it to be an honor and a privilege to have had you as a guest. You were early on with us when the WND days, and have been on with us almost every week. Every month since we launched, and become a good friend and one of my favorite people. And so you are a treasure to us, and we thank you for always making a solid contribution.
Well, I thank you so much, Eric. I think that the pleasure has been all mine, and I feel the same way about you, my friend. You and your folks there, and we'll definitely keep you in our prayers out here. I know God's got something good for you.
He does indeed. Amen. Amen. Blessings to you. We're going to take a short break,
And you.
and when we come back, we'll bring you the next edition of Revealing the Truth.